Hello, welcome to the Save Our Children podcast. We're your hosts, Becky and Bridget. Today, we are speaking to EmmaJane Taylor, founder of The Works, a series of lifestyle businesses that was founded over 25 years ago. But due to the sexual abuse she experienced as a child, she has organically found herself in a place of activism, speaking, and presenting. In 2018, EmmaJane wrote the motivational self-help book, Don't Hold Back, based on her personal and difficult story of child sexual abuse, or CSA, rejection, and abandonment. In 2021, she gave her TEDx talk titled, It's Not Just Strangers We Should Be Careful Of, the message that aligns to her new charity Project 9010, which speaks to the statistic that 90% of children are being abused by someone they know, yet we teach stranger danger, which only covers about 10%. Child sexual abuse is what they're focusing on Project 9010 through education, reducing that through education, knowledge, protection, awareness, care, and research. Welcome to our podcast. We are thrilled to have you on today. Can you please give our listeners some more background on your journey and how you've made it through to be such a successful woman that you are today?
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me here with you on your podcast and for the great work that you continue to do to raise awareness on such difficult subjects. So just sort of in a summary, really, I'm a professional woman and, as you say, the founder of the Works company. I've organically grown into the role of as an advocate and voice on the subject of child sex abuse, and a space that I feel very passionate about and very encouraged by with the work that I'm doing, and certainly the work people like yourselves are doing. I was written off as a young person, often called the failure, the girl going nowhere. My journey through sexual abuse was as a 9-year-old through to 16-year-old. And when I was around 12, my biological father, he was just my handsome prince, someone I deeply loved and cared for. He told me he never wanted to see me again. And his complex story, I'm sure, not mine, but it was a battle for years to trying to understand how someone who you should be having unconditional love with could walk away from you. So that's been a huge battle, as has been dealing with the aftermath of child sex abuse and the complexities around that as you go into your late teens and 20s. So for most of those years, I was a failure, I guess, in people's eyes. I was broken, I was drinking, I was addicted, I had many disorders, I had many addictions. But when you look at it with fresh eyes and you peel back the layers, I was never the failure. Ironically, it wasn't me, it was the people around me that weren't treating me as they should be and supporting me as they should be. So I've had to learn a great deal from those years, as we all have, anyone who's gone through any trauma of sexual abuse, because, like I always say, there's no competition here, right? Any child sex abuse is horrendous. It doesn't matter if it was 1 day, 6 months, 6 years, or your whole lifetime. Every case is horrendous and every case should be talked about. And I know a lot of people who really do shy away because they're like, oh, I know someone who was abused for 6 years and mine only went on for like 2 days. I'm like, it doesn't matter. It should never have happened in the first place. So I've kind of, through therapy, I went into therapy at 23 years old. I think I was, I think you sort of hit your 20s, your late teens, 20s, and is expected to go and find that career. And I couldn't fit into that corporate world. I was a bit of a square peg in a round hole, and realized that wasn't really where I wanted to be. As a professional dancer, someone who loves fitness, I really felt aligned to that kind of world and lifestyle. So I stepped away. I set up a tap dance class, 10 people, me in a hall. I temped to earn enough money just to pay my bills and to keep a roof over my head. And any excess money went to my therapist. because I understood I needed to get some help. I didn't talk about it. No one really knew what was going on. And I just built my business, and I grew with therapy and business, therapy and business, therapy and business. And as my world developed professionally, personally, I really started to feel like I was putting myself back together. It wasn't easy. I felt personally I needed to have that outlet with professional help for many years. And now I rave about it. And even though I don't spend my life talking about my past, I now work with professionals to help keep a clear air moving forward, because ultimately that is our success as well. So I never was the failure. I wasn't the juvenile delinquent that my psychiatrist said. I was, sadly at that time, and I hate to use this word, I was a victim of other people's bad behavior. Now I see I have survived. I am a survivor. I don't like to label myself as a survivor. I don't think any of us should. And we find our own role. So my role now is as an advocate and voice on the subject of child sex abuse, alongside working at the Works company with my team, my clients, and the work that we're doing here in the UK and across the world.
Thank you for that. You are definitely a powerful voice for the voiceless, and you are making a global impact. So we're honored to be able to have the opportunity to even speak with you today. So again, thank you, especially like in the UK, most people, that was one of the things that first inspired me, is when we got connected to a UK survivor and Samantha Brown, and just hearing what was going on in the UK, and it hits home in a different way. And when you hear survivors talk about their stories and you see it's happening on a global scale, most people often think what the media makes it is, it's that they paint a picture that isn't reality. So you're looking for this person with all of these charges, or the unsheltered community, or you don't really think that it could be a politician or a family member or school teacher, those trusted adult figures. So going into one thing that you talk about with Project 9010 is, if we can go into the grooming aspect, especially red flags, and in the family, different things that parents could even look for, because this isn't talked about and it's such a taboo topic.
Yeah, I mean, grooming, and it's very sophisticated, really, as a starter for 10. I think anyone, and ally, non-survivors, it's a very hard conversation to engage with, because when you think grooming, you think sinister, you think dark, and it's not. It's a beautiful process. And we don't talk about this. I was, as a 9-year-old, I'm an animal lover. I have animals, have dogs and cats and bunnies. But as a child, they were really important to me. And as I grew up, more important. And I realize now they very much align with abuse survivors as well. And we were on holiday, and the restaurant owners took the children away from the parents every night to go and see the animals. I was at the front of the queue, hand up, I want to be there, jumping with joy, 9 years old, going out there. Now, my mother and my stepfather, they're not bad people. And they just saw me happy and going out with my new friends, my pen pals, because that's what we had back then. And out we went to see all the animals, and we did this most nights. We were probably at that restaurant every other night, I'd say. So these guys were great. They were really good fun. They were nice. They were kind. They were generous. And then this one night, the lovely guy who had taken us always out to see the animals and treat us, and he took me away from the other people. But I trusted that man because he was my friend. And so he'd bought my kindness. He'd been very sophisticated. He'd become friends with my family. He'd become friends with the other children. I don't know. I have no idea what happened to the other children. I can only imagine it was happening to all of us. So it was a nice person. And I think this is where we've got to really change this conversation. The people grooming you aren't necessarily, the men in the long jackets and the smoking hats and coming out of dark corners and woods. They are family, friends, acquaintances, sadly in the authorities as well. And so what do you look for? Well, I would be very cautious now as a parent if my child was going out with friends to see animals with two older men, because I've learned what happened to me as a child. I'm not suggesting for 1 minute that everybody is a child sex abuser, but I would be cautious. So if those children went out, I'd be going with them. And I would be making sure that when they're out in the darks and the depths of the farmland or surrounding the restaurants, that there was an adult with them and all children were safe. Now, there's nothing wrong with that. And like I say, I don't want to accuse everybody of being a child sex abuser, but we just need to be savvy. We need to be a bit brighter about this. When all of us are educated people, but it's learning to trust you, trust what you know, trust what you believe, and taking that to support your children. As a parent to a child who is now going into their teenage years, I'm very open about this, and I don't scare my child in any way, shape or form. I just make sure that if my child is going anywhere that seems to be different or with older people, that they let me know, and I will assess the situation and who's around that situation as to whether that will happen. That's just, for me, common sense now as a parent after what I've learned. And that's not taking away from, and I think the difficulty is for the previous generations who have been parents of children who've been abused, is they feel so bad and guilty. That's not because they're not nice people, but they lived in a different world. We left kids in prams on the street. We let kids walk into town. We didn't have social media. We didn't have phones. We didn't have access to any of that. We had a different kind of system and sophistication going on with relationships. And I don't blame parents, actually, but I take my role now as a responsible role to help generations moving forward to understand that you don't have to think that everyone in your family or your life is a child sex abuser, but just be a bit more switched on if something seems different. And I say that to children, I say that to my child. As my abuse progressed, it progressed with a family friend. My father had left me broken, in pieces, and this family friend was just my new friend, someone who came in and made me feel comfortable and gave me nice gifts, gave me attention, would offer to take me off to take me off to places to relieve my parents. Now, again, my parents didn't see any bad in it. They knew this person. So why would they consider? As a parent now, if anyone adult started to show some interest in my child in that way, I would definitely jump in there and intervene. So my lessons now have taught me that groomers aren't the people hiding in woods. They're hidden in plain sight. And that's what we've got to really just share more and more and more. Obviously, like you say, I've shared my TED talk, but that's not enough. I've only got 13,000 views on it. We've got 8 million people living in this world, right? We need 8 million people to be watching that. And a lot of people are like, oh, I don't want to watch, it upsets me. And I'm like, it upsets you. Well, what about the child who's been abused? What about their upset? How about giving them a little bit of respect and learning and being able to share that with other people? So yeah, so it's a big conversation, but to sort of sum that up, groomers and abusers are hidden in plain sight, and it's not about believing that everybody's going to hurt you. It's just being a bit more savvy and switched on if something seems different or unusual.
No, I really like that. And that's something that I have talked to my boys. My boys are 13 and 11, and to talk to them about them also being aware of the situation. Like, your friends may not be, your friends' parents may not be, but you are, because I am. And so just keeping an eye out for each other. Nope, that seems a little weird. I'm getting a gut instinct that that's a problem. Let's turn around and go somewhere else. Let's do these things. Let's inform our friends. Because if we can start, like you said, if we can start creating this education that kids are aware, we can also hopefully not give the situations the foothold that they need. One thing that you said in your TED Talk that kind of punched me in the gut, because I know I was one of that kind of parent, was, have you ever given your child permission to say no to an adult in their life? And how many times you're like, just go hug grandma. Just go give Uncle so-and-so a hug goodbye, or do whatever. And we don't allow them to be like, yeah, that doesn't make me okay. Or if they say, hey, you want to go to the zoo? Well, I mean, it's your uncle. Why would that be a problem? Or it's someone you know. Why would that be a problem? When they're like, yeah, I don't really want to do that. So are we giving permission to our kids to say no?
Yeah, and you're absolutely right. And it's something, like I said in that TED Talk, I would have been told off.
Yeah, me too.
to say, no, I don't want to do that. It would have been seen as being rude. And I don't think this is about being rude. It's about giving children that voice to say, no, I don't feel comfortable with it. I'm going to call my parent.
Mm-hmm.
It's quite simple, isn't it? So what is that language we're using with the children? If something's happening that is an awkward and uncomfortable situation, maybe your child's in town and someone's come up who they know, and they say, right, we're taking you home today. Your mum's or your dad's just called me. Well, that's a red flag straight away if the child doesn't know that. So I've taught my child to say, no, I need to check with my parent first, because I haven't had that instruction. So I'm giving my children and the children that I'm working with instructions on how to do it in a way that's isn't, we don't need to be rude, we don't need to be offensive, we just need to be savvy and looking after and smart. So if you're at your family home and the uncle or the friend or even the, that's auntie, right? Let's not just assume this is all men, says, hey, your mum's just said, or your dad's just said, we're going for a walk with a dog. So do you want to just go and tell them we're going to do that? So instead of the child trusting that adult in going, get the child to say, did you just give permission for auntie or uncle or whoever friend of the family to go for a walk with me? Always give them a way to question and query things without just accepting it, especially when they're sort of into their teens. Earlier on in life, I think it's very hard to navigate those conversations. So I think it is very much the responsibility of the parent to take that control and ownership over that child and conversation, and not be letting that child go regularly with someone who seems to want to have that relationship with your child.
I love that, because so many parents often will say, well, I don't want to take the innocence from my child, or they're not ready to have these specific conversations. And we often talk about on our podcast is there's a way to have these conversations, but make them age appropriate. So many people often think that you have to go straight into, we talk about body awareness, and even just pointing that out and using the proper names, because if something was to happen and God forbid you have to take it to a court situation and it goes to a legal matter, now they might not get the charge because you made that nickname. We had a guest on where they called it the cookie, and the little girl reported it to the teacher, and the teacher just thought, oh, like that's kind of weird. She was thinking about a cookie and not the physical body part and what they named that. So I think that's important to have those conversations, especially at a young age.
Totally. And this is something I do have with my child. I'm like, a penis is a penis, a vagina is a vagina, and a breast is a breast. That's your ear. You don't call it a nana. You don't call your nose something different. But we seem to call it foo-foo, wand, and all these magical, wonderful terms, and it means nothing. And so, yeah, so totally align with you there, because that's a lot of the work that we're doing. We're building as A to Z and a vocabulary on this. Say it as it is. I say it sometimes, we'll be at dinner table and I say it to my children, they're like, oh my God, do we have to have this conversation? I'm like, yeah, we do. It's a penis, and it's, let's not make fun of it. Let's make no jokes about it. Let's not put, a lot of people put fun around this humor, and it's not, we can't have it as a humorous conversation. I was with some kids recently who were talking about 69ers, right? They're 12, 13. And I said, what's a 69er? And they went, oh, and they didn't know what to say. And they were just so embarrassed. And I was like, well, I don't get it. What is it? And of course, they didn't really know what it meant.
Right. I was gonna say, probably didn't really know either.
Yeah. But I'm like, where are they getting that language from? Right. Because, certainly as a parent myself, I wouldn't have those conversations. And I know we're all different. But actually, and this is where the complexities really do tackle these come up against brick walls, is because there are parents who think that it's acceptable to have jokey humor about, I call it the toilet humor, right? Around those kind of conversations. And in context with kids, it's not funny. I've heard kids not even 13 talking about when they're going to lose their virginity. What? I mean, it's just mind-numbingly worrying.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have a 12-year-old, and some of the conversations they talk about at school, I'm like, what are you like, where are the parents, and what conversations are they having at home? But then even going to social media, like my kid recently created a TikTok behind my back with her friends, and she doesn't have a cell phone or any of that technology. She has her iPad, but it's mostly to do schoolwork. But she created a TikTok behind my back and then happened to log in when she got home from my iPad, but forgot to log out. And so I went to go turn on my iPad for my little niece to play on it. And I was like, what are all these text messages? One, from random little boys, and two, like, what is this TikTok? And so luckily hers wasn't bad, but we still had that conversation of the lying. And even though you knew I saw it, why did you feel the need to go back and delete it after we had a conversation about it? Like, we could have deleted it together. And so just even having that open conversation, and then going through her friends' TikToks, and I was like, oh my gosh, how are they doing this on campus? Like, how are they in the bathrooms twerking in between classes and posting all these videos? And then like, just like the twerking on the floor and the dry humping. I'm like, you guys think you're just doing this dance, but it's all the butt shaking and everything that society's normalized. And it's like, this isn't okay. So I know she was upset with me for a little bit, because I went through my phone and I'm that parent. I have every single parent's phone number. So as I saw my kid on some of these girls' TikToks, I was like, I told the parent, can you remove my daughter off of TikTok? I know it's not your kid's fault or your fault, but as a parent, I want you to know, like, I don't allow that for my child. We had a conversation, but I don't want her on that open platform. And so they removed them. But it was just like, for me, she's like, why can't you just text my friends? And so for me, it was like, me as a parent, I'm hoping that the parent goes and checks that kid's phone to see what is on their profiles, to say, oh, like, alert, maybe I should look into this app, and hopefully have that conversation of internet safety. And it's crazy that it even happened, because she hears our podcast. She knows what we do. She knows, like, we're very transparent about everything with our podcasts and social media. We often talk about it. So when that happened, I went straight to my phone to them, and I'm like, oh my gosh, this just happened. Like, how? And so we have those moments as parents, but thankfully, like, she was asleep. And so I had that conversation. I had that moment to like calm down and be like, okay, Bridget, don't freak out. And that's oftentimes too is another thing we talk about, is as a parent, remembering to sit back and not freak out and just react, and having that moment to say, okay, I'm going to give the kid the opportunity to speak and let them use their voice and tell you, and then go about it as far as like discipline and everything from there.
So really, I mean, this is probably about a 10-hour conversation on its own, social media and kids. Now, I don't let my children have social media. I don't believe in it. I think there's adults shouldn't have social media because they don't know it. And we're giving this small bit of technology that fits in your hand that goes through to the world. And so my children can have WhatsApp. I've taught them about Snapchat and Instagram and Twitter and Facebook and the powers of that and what is acceptable and what isn't. I don't want my child to be feeling inferior because of what she's seeing online. I don't want her to see things that aren't real, because none of it is real. When you're looking at pictures and activity, kids just want to be out there being seen, and we're doing this, we're doing that. And like I say, when I kind of strip back to when I was at school, we were learning computer studies, right? And then we went on to learn computers. We're having no technology for kids. We're not having any lessons about what's acceptable and what isn't. We have PHSE here. I think it ticks a box. I think it ticks the box in the educational system, and they do that to appease the system and parents and make sure that everybody's seen to be doing the right things. And I'm not saying that they're not, because the schools do work really extremely hard with all the children. But as you girls know, this, many of the subjects that we're giving, that the children are being given, are they using them? Could we be better informing children by doing an assembly every day about this, just a 5-minute prayer or reminder of healthy relationships and technology, and then maybe a technology lesson in there as well. But I just think there's a lot of emphasis on the wrong things, and it's a bit of an archaic system still, the schooling systems, considering we're in the 21st century facing social media, online and internet and everything else, world where people are being groomed, and there's a high rate of suicide in young people. There's suicide pacts online. There are eating disorder pacts online. There is, offensive pictures of young people online by young people. And so I challenge all of that. And I just think, do you know what, let's really do our best for our kids by teaching them what's important and what's not. I remember my child said to me, have you been looking at my phone? I said, yeah. They said, why? I said, because you're 12 and I'm 49 and I'm still your parent. And until you reach 16 and you're more responsible and educated on technology, I want to keep an eye. I said, look, I'm not being prying. I'm just making sure that you're not being added to groups that aren't what I don't believe is right. And why not? I mean, I'd have that conversation with my child if we were talking about groups she's meeting at the park, right? You've got to keep an eye on this stuff. And I think, well, look, I'm sure I'm not alone in that, but I know a lot of parents don't. I remember one night looking at the phone and seeing a conversation in a group, and I was like, oh my God. I mean, my child was in a group with 200 kids. And I probably knew 3 of those kids. So I took my child out and I said the next day, I'm not happy about that. And we need to try, but we need to monitor this. We need to remember kids are vulnerable. They're going to go with the flow, which makes it very easy if you're going to groom a child, if you're going to, children want to get, like you say, go on TikTok and this, that, and the other. I had my child, when confronted with why haven't you got Snapchat, I do hear the conversation, my mum doesn't allow it and I'm cool with it, actually. But at some point we'll move that forward when I feel that my child's ready. At the moment, they are absolutely not.
Yeah, my kids, they're too vulnerable for that, and more emotionally than anything else, in the sense of I as your parent cannot allow you to go find your worth, your happiness, your whatever in this app. I need you to learn how to have it yourself. before I allow you to then do something somewhere else. And that to me is a big thing. But on the idea of looking through the phone, my boys, I have an app on their phone. It's called Bark, and it alerts me daily that they things that are violent, bullying, of sexual nature, medicine or drugs, anything. Like I could say, did you take an ibuprofen? And that'll alert me that there's drug usage or something. And so I'm able to say, here's what's going on. But last year, my younger son, who was in 5th grade at the time, he was in a group chat, and all of a sudden it started talking about, I'm going to kill you. I'm going to hunt you down. One girl said, you don't even know what it's like. My stepdad abuses me. And it alerted me. And I was like, what do I even do with this knowledge? So I ended up taking it to their teacher, because it was all kids in the same class. And I was like, I don't even know what to do with this, but these parents need to know that this is happening. And so now, because that happened, I still see the current chat he's in with his new friends. And some of the friends in there are the ones that were part of this group. So they will say, keep it family friendly. Somebody will be watching. Make sure that we're not saying anything. And so now the text, it's stupid 12-year-old stuff, but it's not offensive. It's not bullying. It's not talking about all of that stuff. And it's like, if that's what it took, was that those kids knew that somebody, myself, was watching, just be 12, stop.
And I completely agree with you. And it's interesting, actually, I remember seeing a conversation on one of these WhatsApp groups, only because I was alerted to it by my child. And I looked at it, I was like, oh my goodness, this boy was being extremely offensive and inappropriate about older women, and using words that were just totally inappropriate, the C word, the F word.
Yikes.
Anyway, I'm thinking, right, how do I handle this? So I talked to my friends of the kids in the groups, and we decided to get one of the fathers involved to approach the family. Now, kind of wrong that we have to do that, but mothers and women, unfortunately, can be seen as dramatic and undermined when facing these confrontational conversations with other parents. Obviously, it would be mothers as well. So wrong as it was, it felt like it was the right thing to do, because we needed to get this boy dealt with. And the parent was mortified. The father was mortified, told the child off, and the mother would have been mortified as well. But I think it was just a very awkward conversation to try and maneuver, because we all knew each other so well. I had no shame in going up and having this conversation, because I'm very comfortable with having those conversations. But equally so, I do realize how dramatic and offensive they can then suddenly become. So it's navigating the conversations properly, but flagging it. And of course, people are too afraid to flag stuff, so they just let stuff go, and then there's the problem already.
Yeah, that's a great point. I know when everything happened with my daughter's situation, the other thing I went to was the school. And I said, even though I already knew the technology policy and phones aren't allowed on campus and all of that, only in between breaks or at lunch, I still asked, what's the technology policy? What is the school doing for online safety? And because all these kids are logged in. And when I saw a bunch of the TikToks, I'm like, how is this happening in the school hallways? Like, teachers have to be walking by an adult, somebody. So I think too, even just remembering that it's okay to ask questions. And if anything, we often talk about the power of one, is knowing that if it helps save one person or even educating one person, it causes a ripple effect and really can make a change and difference. So even just being aware as a parent and educating yourself, it will change not only how you parent, but like the environment around your kids and making them aware as well.
And just being, and I think actually listening to conversations about this and not believing that it won't happen to your child and it won't happen to someone and having some respect for the people involved, and just because it's topical with what's going on around the world with the current situation with Russia and Ukraine, I can't bear watching it, but I make myself watch it because I want to give respect and peace to those people involved. I know we're off subject there, and I don't want to become, this isn't political, and I don't want it to be political, but it's, you know, when I'm talking about child sex abuse, or I've just had a conversation with a parent whose 6-month-old baby was molested and had every bone broken in their body by their father because they just couldn't bear the weight, and the abuse was so violent. People just go, oh God, I don't want to talk about it. Don't tell me. Well, you know, we all have to sit and watch uncomfortable conversations and see awkward and sad things, but that's what then engages us, and that empathy is what's going to help this conversation. And it's a really important, I don't want sympathy, right? I want to educate, I want to teach, I want to share empathy, and I want to remember that how difficult it was for me and the many others that I've got to know. But I also, the other conversation about this is that you've got to believe kids. You know, if someone's telling you something, don't just brush them off saying, oh, you know, they probably made it up, or no child would really understand this. So, you know, have that belief. So, you know, lean in, as difficult as it is. And even if you don't want to lean in, like we do all the time on these conversations, just a little bit of leaning in is really going to help us develop. We need allies. We need people to come in with us. We need to not be survivors going round in circles. We need allies to come in and take this step, share our silence.
Yeah, and going off of that, I watched one of your YouTubes, the My Story, My Voice. And that's actually too one thing when reading your book, and Don't Hold Back. And even in your YouTube, one thing, and I'll let you go into it, but as far as hearing you talk about your biggest regret, and just hearing you even talk about believing the child. So many survivors often get silenced, or they're not believed when they're trying to speak out. And we see it in society today. So many people are disconnected, and so many people just are trying to share their stories and just want to be heard and loved. And oftentimes people turn a blind eye to it, especially when it comes to anything around the topics of trauma or human trafficking. It's too much for people, and they often turn a blind eye to it. So if we can go into how you describe your biggest regret, and then lead into your book and where people can buy that book, even though we'll link it in the show notes, but if we can go into that.
Yeah, so my biggest regret, and I had to give this answer in a BBC program here in the UK, was that I wished I'd spoken out sooner. And that is because, and I don't think I didn't speak out. I spoke out because I was too afraid to speak out, and I was also unsure that what was happening to me was wrong because people were so nice about it. And you just get very confused. So if only I'd had that confidence to be able to say what had happened to me that day or how I was feeling, that would have been a really, really, really big part of my recovery. You know, and when I sort of look at that now with where I'm at and what I'm doing in my life, you know, I'm not grateful to my abusers in any way, shape or form, don't get me wrong. But I am honoured to be here sharing now my lessons to help others survive their pain and their silence. Now, it would never change things if I'd have spoken up sooner. I might not be here having these conversations with you because I might have dealt with things in a different way and faced, as a younger person, a recovery that I didn't face as an older person. So, like I say, it's not about gratitude, it's about understanding that this lesson and and what my abusers have taught me has now been an honor to be able to pay that forward to help those that are silenced, you know, and remembering that my silence was my perpetrators, it wasn't my silence. and the perpetrators remain silent for obvious reasons, but abuse is their silence, not ours, and we need to really encourage people to step forward. So writing Don't Hold Back was a really difficult one, actually, because I never set out to be an author. I never thought I'd write a book. And then suddenly I was like, it feels like the right thing to do, because I felt a bit of a fraud, actually. I was working at the time as the lead presenter for That's TV wellbeing show, and I was interviewing people all the time about, you know, how they got to where they got in life and their authentic self. And I have been successful in my business in the communities, and you know, I think everyone just considered me to be someone who was okay in life. And I'm not saying I'm not okay in life, but I've had to work very hard to be okay in life. And like you and many others who are where we are in life, occasionally something does come back and bite you psychologically. And it's then how you deal with it. So I've got my tools in my toolbox, and I've taken I think I took nearly 20 years of therapy to have this toolbox to be the strong woman I am, the advocate and the voice, the author, the speaker, the presenter and trainer on many different sort of subjects about behavioural change. That didn't come overnight. I don't advise anybody to speak up sooner than you need to on a public platform, because it can cripple your life and your world. And I've seen that happen 1,000 times over the last few years. What I do advise, though, it is important to find a therapist or a friend or someone to talk to, and start that route first. Don't just, you know, it's certainly not glamorous, right, out here front line with this kind of conversation. And I do have to have I have a big support system around me. I have a big team around me. I'm not, you know, I do have a lot of people on my side with this. So when I started writing the book, I was like, oh, I don't know, I can do this, you know, and I didn't want it to be a dark tale of, you know, all the difficulties I'd faced. I wanted it to be how I've overcome those dark difficulties.